I guess what I'd like to do is draw from what I've been doing for the last 30 years. I've been involved in the field of education for 30 years as a teacher, as a university instructor, as an education consultant, and as a textbook author for Oxford University Press. And a key role of being an educator is to present the diverse character of the world to learners in ways that evoke wonder, enlightenment, and concern. So it's my responsibility to be aware of how the world works in a full, fair, and open-minded manner. A key skill is to do so in a way that you can capture the thinking styles of all of the students. And I teach what I call the bookends, which are grade 7 and university. So you can imagine that I have to adapt how I deliver to those different age groups. And that requires intuition, adaptability, and creativity. The educational environment can be a minefield of issues and challenges. And so it's my responsibility to appreciate that while I may have no choice in what enters that environment, I have every choice in how I deal with it, which promotes in me critical thinking and creative problem solving. And lastly, a key motivating force is that I see myself, again, as an advocate for every child that walks through that door. And actually at university, I don't call them children, but each person is a unique identity. They have infinite combinations of personality traits and experiences and families and skill sets and moods and emotions. And my responsibility, actually, my mission, is to ignite learning in all of those students and to be supportive and to encourage, to foster their hopes, encourage their dreams. And I think a lot of the skills that I've talked about, I would like to just parallel, to the political arena. They're both they're both intensively interpersonal. Advocacy is a key operating principle. They require the skills of awareness, critical thinking, problem solving, and an action commitment. And they have the virtues of trust and respect at their very cores. So I think that probably the biggest thing that I would draw on to enter politics would be 30 years of training in all of those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. So personal qualifications. What would I bring to the job of MP, Member of Parliament? Well, first of all, I'm a team player. I love the team game, with the shared objectives and the shared resources and the shared outcomes. I'm also a people person and also a bit of a maverick. I have an independent streak. I can startle bureaucrats and status quo thinkers. I can recognize and accept a good idea that is not my own. I'm gracious, optimistic, independent, cooperative, and supportive. I bring energy, enthusiasm, and hope. I am open-minded with a wide-angle view of the world, and I am still learning. My glass is more than half full. I see the assets and the opportunities. I transcend the doom and gloom. I don't have time for it. I'm proactive rather than reactive. I see beyond the 4-year election cycle. Qualifications. Some personal skills I bring to the party. I'm a strategic thinker, a speaker, a communicator. I see the need, I see the work, I can plan the work. What's my time, Mel?
You got about 20 seconds.
Perfect, thank you. So personal qualifications. Professional qualifications. I've been self-employed and I've worked for government. I've practiced as a fisheries technician and as an economic development officer. I bring skills as a facilitator, as a consensus builder. I bring common goals into focus. I build teams. I can make cold calls. I can plan the work. I can plan projects. I help make things happen. And I'd like to bring all of that to the program and be your voice at head table in Ottawa. Thank you.
Niki gets the last word on this one.
When I was approached last March, I gave this a lot of serious thought and I started researching what it would take to be a good MP. I reached out to a few Liberal MPs, and one of them was Kirsty Duncan in Toronto, and I asked her, what did it take to be a good MP? She said, Niki, each and every day I'm learning about different issues that I've never ever heard before. She said, if anyone comes into this position thinking they know it all, or that they're choosing to run because they think of themselves as politically savvy, they have this job all wrong. She said, it's good first and foremost that you want to serve. But secondly, no one should underestimate the need to listen and the hard work that is required to advocate each and every day for your riding. If you truly care about people, Niki, and you work hard to get their issues noticed, then that is the best person to have representing your riding. My experience as an entrepreneur has taught me courage, problem solving, and to have an open mind. I know the economy and the environment cannot work in isolation of each other. I know that no matter how much you read about an issue, it doesn't make it true until you've walked a mile in someone else's shoes that's being affected. I'm a champion of causes, and I love this community, and I am gladfully raising my son in it. With the same liberal values that I grew up with, and that I know I share with many of you. It is my hope that you agree with me that with hard work, we can achieve liberal representation in the Kamloops Thompson Cariboo. And I am asking you to choose to partner with me with hope and hard work to resurrect Canadian values.
Well, we're running bang on time, so it leaves us time for one or two more questions before we wrap up, if you so wish. Question from Christopher.
What's your stance on Ajax?
What's Ajax? Oh, it's a detergent.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, would that be me?
That would be you.
Congratulations, Steve.
Whoa. It's interesting because Ajax seems to be the litmus test in this community about where you're going to stand. And I can tell you, first of all, that I believe that there should have been a panel review. I think it was irresponsible not to have one. One of the policies of this government when they started decimating the science-based ministries, aside from the Fisheries Act and Environment Canada, they started foisting the panel reviews onto the provincial governments. And of course, the Environmental Assessment Office is not as rigorous, and it's not as comprehensive, and it's not as independent. The science from a panel review is much more independent and much more rigorous. But in answer to your question, because I seem to be deflecting, my initial impressions, I will say that when I first came to this town, it was for 2 years, and I've been here for 35. And one of the reasons for that is because the quality of life is amazing. And I think it would be irresponsible to say that I did not have concerns about a mine that is perched on top of a hill above our city. My impression is that there are a lot of issues with that in terms of air and water quality, in terms of slope stability, in terms of elements being released from the ground and put into the air. And I think even tailings ponds is a bit of an issue now, isn't it? But I will say that one of the mainstays of my role as an educator is that I'm a critical thinker, and I promote it in every student that I have. And the steps of critical thinking are: one, dissonance, and there definitely is dissonance. The second is questions, and there are pages and pages of questions on Ajax Mine. The third step is to gather information. And that's where it becomes more comprehensive. Gathering information requires gathering from multiple sources and multiple perspectives. So right now, we have some wonderful sources of data in terms of CAPA, in terms of the physicians, environmental group. But we have not heard from a major party in that. And some people would say, well, you're being wishy-washy. It's not being wishy-washy, it's actually being a good critical thinker, which is you suspend judgment until you have all the information. So for instance, when I finally come to a decision, people will look at that and say that was well thought out. If I came to a decision based on first impressions, then they would say, well, he's just speaking off the top of his head. That's the kind of thing I do when my daughter is on a first date. I say, go with your first impressions. And usually it will be, sorry boy. But I am going to say that as a critical thinker, I am concerned about it. I'm concerned about the quality of life in our community. I'm concerned about a lot of the other implications of the mine. I'm not resource development. I'm not against resource development. In fact, I'm very much for it. But I'm also a huge booster of quality of life. And so I will wait and I will see. And what does that mean?
That means
Get
speed
going.
up a little bit.
So Chris, I guess, does that answer your question?
This is a test of how well you answer a difficult question in a short period of time. That's the personal qualification and skill that it requires.
Well, yeah, well, obviously I don't have that.
Admittedly, it's a question that is hard to answer in 2 minutes, but Peter, give it a try.
Thank you, Mel. Steve, I thought you did rather well on that. It's an easy question to ask, but it's not an easy question to answer because there is no answer at this point. I'll speak at this from an economic development point of view and that concept of the balance between economy, environment, and social. This is the largest question in our community right now. It has been for some time and it will be for some time to come. Steve's exactly right. There's a process to looking at these things and a huge piece of that is data collection. True data collection, not opinion collection, not opinion analysis, but data analysis. And not all of that data is available for analysis just yet. So I too remain with an open mind on this particular topic. Where does wealth come from? It's actually generated from processes that take raw materials and turn them into the next stage, next level of product. Our human history has been known by mining ages, the Stone Age, the Iron Age, the Bronze Age. All of those technologies defined how we anchored economies, how we won wars, how we tilled the soil, how we came ahead, how we educated ourselves. We're still in those games of mining. Mining creates wealth. There are horror stories on the back trail of mining, some of which where the mine is in, the shareholders do well, they scoop all the gravy, they go away, they dissipate. Who's left with the mess? Well, this is not the balance that I want to see in this case. Unfortunately, in our society, we have processes to gather the data, analyze the data, make some decisions. The environment is a key piece. And the tailings pond discussion, gosh, they're retooling from a dry to a wet up above our city. If that one lets go, what does a scoured out Peterson Creek look like? There's another question. That's got to come up, that's got to be looked at, that's got to be studied. Maybe we have to go back to first principles and say, well, maybe the dry management's the way to go. The data's still being collected, it's still being analyzed, we'll see. Without the wealth creation of some mining programs or some forestry programs, we do not have social programs. We cannot have a tax base, and we cannot fund programs, we cannot have wages, we cannot have consumers. So there truly is a balance in this whole discussion. So I will go on record as saying, I'm okay with a mine in this area if, and catch this please, if it's done right. It must be done right. And all of the questions, all of the issues have to be part of the program. The data has to be there. I'm keeping an open mind until the data's there.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Christopher. If I can just take a minute and take you to Mount Poly, if I can just take a minute and ask you to put the environmental catastrophe aside and think about the workers that are now out of a job. They have mortgages to pay, they probably have big truck payments to get them in and out of there, and they have families to feed, and they're out of work. Imperial Metals, they might be down for a time, but they're not losing their mortgages. They're not losing their houses or their trucks. There's a whole bunch of other workers there that don't know if they're going to be going to work from one week to the next. That is a huge issue when we don't look after our environment. The entire process has been handled very poorly by our federal government. We've been neglected. We must have sustainability in the economy, socially, and the environment. They have to work together. If we look at Venture Kamloops, they did a study recently to show that Ajax is going to be an economic home run. And yay, TRU did a study, and it did not show that. All right? So who do we believe? We're not there yet. We need to draw more intelligence, our scientific expertise, and use our ability and willingness to solve these type of problems. And we can get there. I believe we can get there, but we're not there yet.
Thank you. There was one more question out of left field down in the front here somewhere that somebody wanted to ask. Sure, go ahead.
I actually wanted to follow up on Melissa's question because I don't think it got answered in the way that she anticipated. She clearly is, as indicated, she's been supporting the NDP. And I think the question and concern is what happened the last election was that the NDP and the vote got split. So up the middle came Catherine McLeod and she won the election. What, if anything, can you do to distinguish yourselves from the NDP candidate? Because we know Bill Sandhu is now running for the NDP in this riding. He's a very well qualified candidate. How are we going to distinguish ourselves from someone like that and Tom Mulcair federally in order that the vote splitting doesn't occur again? Because that's, as a Liberal, I'm quite concerned about that. I don't care who gets elected as long as it's not Harper, quite frankly. We can't handle another 4 years of Harper. So what do you see us doing as a party? What do you see yourself doing?
Okay, as a party more than as a candidate,
Yeah.
the question is?
Well, I guess it could follow from ways.
Is it a vote? Okay, Steve?
I won't speak on Bill as a candidate because I don't know Bill, but I will speak on the party. The question was, go ahead, Mel.
The question was a follow-up to Melissa's question with respect to what both the party and the candidate can do to distinguish themselves from the other parties and not.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that there's a difference between. There's a difference between the Conservatives.
Probably not on. On top.
Sure, no, sorry. It's pretty clear that there's a difference between the Conservatives and the NDP and the Liberals. So our task as a Liberal Party is to distinguish ourselves from the NDP, because what happened in the last election is the vote got split and the Conservatives came up the middle with a majority. What, if anything, can you do to prevent that from happening on this occasion in this particular riding? Because we've got Tom Mulcair at the head of the NDP party, Bill Sandhu running for the NDP here, who's a well-qualified candidate, and what do you see us doing to address that issue?
Steve? Yeah.
I think, first of all, the polarization is not there to the same degree. In fact, Mulcair has brought the NDP much closer to being a centrist party than the NDP were formerly. So I think when you have the gap is reduced, you have less of a distance to jump. It makes it a lot easier to move. I think the other thing is, if you look at the character of the NDP, NDP right now is pretty much, in terms of their MPs, is pretty much the result of a protest vote in Quebec. And that is a huge factor. If you look at British Columbia and Quebec, that is 80% of the NDP right there. And so who is going to be the more representative party? I think the other thing is tone. One of the things that the Liberals are offering is a more collaborative approach and a more positive tone. Thomas Mulcair is a great opposition leader. He's a pit bull, he is in your face, He is stripping away all the veneer, and he is making you accountable. He makes Stephen Harper squirm a lot more than Justin Trudeau does. But what people are saying is they want a change in approach. We've had enough of the pit bull, and I would argue that if they want a change in tone, if they want a centrist policy that is not really that big a leap from where the NDP are right now, and if they want a party that is going to be represented evenly across all of Canada, then it would be a great choice to go with Liberal.
Well done, Steve. And a great question, by the way, because that will take us into strategizing when the game gets real. How will we win this election? How will we win this riding? We'll have to give some serious thought to that. And we'll have to factor in pretty much all of Steve's points. I think we have an advantage as Liberals. We are naturally in the middle. If we lean a little to the left, we can steal some thunder. If we lean a little to the right, we can steal some more thunder. The social programs that the NDP are so strong with and so passionate about, and rightfully so, good on them, we also care about those programs. That's our ground as well. I think we can claim that ground. And we may be able to even collaborate with some traditional NDP supporters who would see that we are actually the shot at taking control or governing in the next little while for the shared values. And I think the Liberals can also work on the right side with some business savvy and a proven record of fiscal management, true fiscal responsibility. The points were made earlier about who had a surplus and who's run up the debts. This current government inherited a gigantic surplus, and now they've got a big hole. We have credibility on the right, and that can attract also those who think it's time for a change with a civil tone and with a smart program going forward, a vote for the future. And I think that's what the Liberal Party, the Federal Liberal Party, can offer. A vote for the future that makes sense for our grandchildren. None of the other parties really have that.
Niki.
I don't know if you're aware, but Bill Sandhu used to be a strong Liberal supporter, but he heard Peter was running, and so he thought there's no way I'd win. So he chose NDP. Just a rumor, just saying. You can quote me. We need strong representation here. We need to excite and ignite the community. We need to paint it red, and we need to get the excitement. People are drawn to excitement, they're drawn to winners, and then they start to open their eyes and their ears to more issues. They learn a little bit more, and then they make really good decisions. There's a lot of preconceived notions out there that NDP maybe is the best for unions. But let me tell you, there's been a lot of union people supporting me. And they're supporting me because Liberal supports unions, it supports people, it supports every single walk of life. I guess that's it. Sorry.
All right, thanks very much, candidates, and to the audience for great questions. We promised the candidates that they'd have an opportunity for some wrap-up remarks, so we're going to do that. We're going to keep it really tight if you don't mind. If you'd written a 10-minute speech, cut it down to 30 seconds and say everything that you didn't have a chance to say earlier. Peter.
Thank you, Mel. Well, first of all, it's a privilege and an honor to be here, and I thank you for showing up again, and I thank both Steve and Niki for being here as well and sharing their views and putting themselves forward. And I'd like to just come right out and say it. Let's be blunt. I'm applying for a job, for this job. I want to be your voice at head table in Ottawa. I want to take the points that have been discussed here, I want to take them forward, package them as smartly and as intelligently as we can, and form the next government in this country. I'm going to try and encourage people to vote for something. I would like to package something that people can be attracted to, can gravitate to, that they want, that they can come and vote for, will transcend all the rest. As mentioned earlier, we're among the wealthiest and best educated people that have ever lived on this planet, and what do we do with this blessing and this privilege? Well, many people articulate their complaints very well, but fortunately there are many, and many in this room even, that involve themselves in community affairs and even global affairs. People that belong to service clubs, volunteer their time. Developing World Connections is one that takes Canadian expertise and heart around the world for good work, unsupported by government. I would like to see our Canadian influence in the global village as a positive contribution, and I would like to strengthen what we already do. I would like to strengthen our government's positive influence regionally in this riding, nationally, and globally. Could we invest more in social housing along with early education and perhaps less in jails? Would that make smart investment sense? I would advance the argument that it would. Could we craft a healing policy for First Nations that could be effective
Okay, Peter,
over a
we
few
give another
generations?
15 seconds or so.
And that's all I'm going to need. Thank you.
Great.
First Nations policy that can see from a generational wavelength instead of an election cycle. And could we export our Charter of Rights along with some economic development tools and maybe less military hardware? So with that, I thank you for listening.
All right, Niki, well, you're up next.
Thank you. In the past 30 years, Canada's economy has doubled in size, but middle-class family incomes have only risen by 15%. For Canada's middle class, the only financial measure that is kept at pace with the GDP is our debt. We're now carrying more household debt than the United States and the United Kingdom. That's scary. I read a story recently about a senior who had to access the Surrey Food Bank. Her husband was extremely ill, and he was put into a long-term care facility. So after paying for her rent, the basic necessities that her husband required, there was little left over. This woman who built our country is going to a food bank. She's just an example of what we don't want to happen. We need to look after our seniors. We need to look after our vets. We need to look after the middle class who are also looking after those that can't help themselves. We need to work together, and we need to stand behind someone who will advocate for you, your lifestyle, your livelihood, and the generations to come. I ask you to stand with me and vote for me. Thank you.
Steve.
If we want to convince people to get into the Liberal lifeboat, we need to convince them that the ship is indeed sinking. And just last week, Stephen Harper provided the fodder for that. He laid out his 3 pillars for his platform. And they're a strong economy, a safer country, and a stronger position in the world. So the strong economy. The economy is seriously underperformed. Job numbers have been abysmal. There's only been 72,000 jobs created in the past 12 months, mostly part-time and low wage. 18,000 jobs alone were lost last month. The manufacturing sector is operating at below capacity, and a Bank of Canada survey found the hiring intentions of businesses were declining. Our safer country. You can't ride on the back of a crime rate that has been decreasing for the past 25 years and take credit for the decline. On the contrary, Aboriginal women have been missing and murdered at a tragic rate, and Harper refuses to launch an inquiry. Leave it to the RCMP, he says. The problem is that the police are involved after the crimes have been committed. An inquiry's goal is to prevent the crimes. And finally, about that stronger position in the world, Canada has increasingly lost relevance and credibility in the eyes of the global community, possibly due to lecturing President Obama on his Keystone stance, or the United Nations 3 separate times on their dastardly deeds, or maybe due to pulling out of the Kyoto Accord or refusing to attend recent Commonwealth conference. And maybe that's why we were passed over for a sure thing security council seat, and why we've been ranked dead last by 2 respected international organizations for our record in dealing with environmental issues. It's time to move out of the dark ages of politics, to once again make our democracy open and fair and responsive, to create a sustainable relationship between a growing economy and a healthy environment, and to re-energize and re-engage Canadians by showing them that we can move Canada into the future by acting on the challenges, issues we face in a fair, reasoned, and productive way. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That concludes our panel discussion for tonight. Thank you to Steve and Peter and Niki, and thank you very much. I enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. So thank you for coming. And thank you, Tyler.
I thought I was torn before, holy cow. But thank you guys very, very much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I had somebody ask me whether or not I really wanted to use the term eminently qualified, but I think this answers that question. A couple things I wanted to quickly mention. Our last 2 candidates are still involved with the Riding Association. They very much wanted to be here, but unfortunately they're both out of town, Murray Todd and Ken Sommerfeld. But we have everything on video. We will be putting it up on YouTube, so you can check it out. You can check out the highlights. Share it with your friends, by all means. This is part of building the movement that will win the election next year for the riding. We do have our candidate selection meeting roughly in 1 month. We don't have a final date set yet. Part of that is we want to make sure that everybody still has a chance to become a party member if you aren't already. The only people that can vote in that candidate selection meeting is party members that live in the Kamloops Thompson Cariboo. We've got about a couple weeks or so we anticipate for the deadline. If you're not a member right now and you do want to vote, let us know. We have everything that we need here right now. Or go to our Facebook page. We've got everything up there as well for how to become a member of the party. It takes $10 a year and it takes about 2 minutes of your time. So that would be wonderful if you wanted to participate. Part of putting on events like tonight, we've done a lot of fundraising in the last year. Of course, we do also have to ask for a little bit of money. Whatever you can afford is absolutely wonderful. Whatever you feel we deserve is wonderful. We can take cash up to $20 from any individual. Anything beyond that, we've got everything we need to take by credit card and by check. Also, if you want to help but you don't have money to give, as we talked about, the middle class doesn't exactly have a whole lot of that right now. We are also looking for more volunteers. We plan to put on a lot of events through the fall leading up into the election next year, which could very well happen in the springtime. If you are interested in being a part of everything that's happening, let us know. We can always use more volunteers. That's something that we're always looking for. Thanks again very, very much for coming out, and please another hand for our candidates. They've been fantastic.